All right. Good night, everyone. Welcome to another class. So, we are going to be finishing off chapter 7.2. We're going to finish off the questions at the end I gave you as homework. So, let's go through each of the question. We're going to go through it one by one person at a time is going to give their answer that they would have come up with, and we can see if we all have the correct answers. So to get us started, the first question. Let's see. So explain the similarity between or differences between a workbook, a worksheet, and a spreadsheet. So we start at the top. Akila, can you go ahead with that question?
Yes, sir. So a spreadsheet is the application in itself, as in the entire application and all of its functions and so forth. That's what is referred to as the spreadsheet. A workbook would be a particular file, and then the worksheets are the things that are found inside the workbook. One workbook would have one or could have multiple worksheets, and then the worksheet is where the grids are set up.
Good, good. Let's have another one. Akhilesh, same
Yes,
question.
sir.
Same question.
Mm,
Did you do the homework?
no.
None of the questions?
Mm, sir, me remember we had homework.
That's sad. Arifa?
Sir, workbooks have one or more worksheet, and the worksheet is the part with the grid where you would place your calculations, and the spreadsheet refers to the application.
Good, good. So I hope the are the rest of you in agreement with that? With the two explanations given by Akila and Arifa?
Yes, sir.
Are great. So they are correct. Um, the term spreadsheet and the it's only the term spreadsheet has basically two definitions you can see. When you say workbook, you're referring to the entire file or the entire book, and the individual pages, those are going to be your worksheet. So you can see the similarities in the name workbook, worksheet. So that's going to help you there. But a spreadsheet that has basically two definitions you can see. That can refer to the entire file or the entire workbook. That can be the spreadsheet or the entire program itself. Microsoft Excel, that can be referred to as spreadsheet. Because remember, spreadsheet is the category of software. Good. So our next question is for each of the following, state whether it is a function or a formula. Um, well, Akhilesh, I think this should be easy for you. Is this a function or a formula?
Sir, it is a function, right?
Good. That is correct. Anaya, the second one.
There is a formula.
That is a formula. That is correct. Ashley, the third one.
Sir, a function.
A function. Christina, four.
14 is a formula.
Didn't not quite hearing you clearly. Some kind of I know your five.
3420 is a formula.
Great. And five, Lee.
Sir, function.
Function, great. Six, Keslin.
Sir, function.
Function, and lastly, Kevandi. Seven. Kevandi. I heard a squeak, and that was about it.
Sir, can you?
A little better, yeah, we're hearing a little better.
A formula.
A formula, great. So all of your answers are correct. So Lillian is gonna get the bonus question. Um, all of the answers of whether they were a function, whether they were a formula was correct. So what is the key difference you would describe to someone to say what would make it different from a function and a formula? What would you tell somebody, Lillian?
Sir, in terms of the formulas, they have specific signs,
Mm-hmm.
like the subtraction, addition, the division, and the ones we use for multiplication. And in
Good.
terms of the term functions, they normally have that same with the two cells in a bracket with a colon. That's how I would identify them.
Good. Good. You did well. So anyone, she spoke about in the formula, you could see the basically the operator. You can see the multiplication operator, the subtraction. So in the function, where is the operator? Anyone?
Sir, the operator is is at the beginning and it's the term instead.
Okay. Anybody else want to try?
Sir, the operator is inside the brackets.
Okay. One more try. Where are the operators? Because remember, operators need to do the calculation. If we just put numbers, we won't get a calculation. If I just put 5 and I just put 5 and I just put another 5, that's 555. And if I want to multiply, I need to put operators. So where are the operators in the function? Yes, Akila?
Sir, for functions, the operator is within the name of the function itself.
Good, good. That's what I'm looking for. So the operator is built into the function. Remember, that's what we looked at. Um, that was here. Function, it is defined as a built-in mathematical formula. So behind the scenes, when that function is used, the software is going to know that the sum function is using the operator plus. This max function is going to use whatever operators to add, and then no, it's not going to use add. It's going to basically do some sort of calculation to get the maximum value. Average, no. Average is going to have the operators of adding and then dividing by whatever. So That's how you can tell the difference between a function and a formula. A function has a name, it has no operators, whereas a formula only has numbers or cell addresses. You only see numbers or cell addresses. You won't see any other name. Or you might see a cell name. Because remember, we can name cells. So you might see a cell name. But other than that, you're going to see operators. But remember also, can we call a function a formula? Anyone, can we call a function a formula? Alright, yes, it's like a gray line area. We can call it a formula. Because remember, the equation is built into the function. So it does have a formula inside of it. But does that we cannot basically see it. Alright, great. So question number 3. Um, explain why it is useful to name a range of data. So we're at Maya.
So it makes accessing which it makes accessing areas on the worksheet easier.
Good. Accessing areas easier. Alicia, any other points? Why is it useful?
Sir, it is easier to locate, read, and understand.
Okay, one more, Pamela.
Sir, to make the areas of the worksheet easier to work with.
Okay, good. So I guess you guys have the same answers there. So yes, that is correct. To make an area of your worksheet easier to access or to work with. Can you guys remember the example that I used? What was the example that I used in the last class? I saw Christina unmute. We didn't hear anything.
Sir, the example you used was names, like a list of names.
Mm, what about the VAT? As an example of using. You guys remember the example with VAT? How I use VAT to
Yes,
calculate,
sir.
right? So that's a usefulness of naming a range. So using that example of VAT here. Good. Question number 4. Answer the following questions based on information for dance lessons as shown in figure 7.17. So this figure here. So let me zoom out so we can see the figure and the questions. So A, identify the name of the feature used in row 1. So that's going to be Shaniqua. Shaniqua. We already lost one person. Sierra.
Sir, I don't really understand the name of the feature.
Hmm. Okay.
What? I don't really understand what they're asking for.
Okay, good. Suraj. Suraj. You're unmuted, but we're not hearing anything. We didn't hear anything. All right, we can come back to you. Anaya, 4A,
Sure, I have it as name of cell range.
name a cell range. Okay. Akila,
Sir, I'm not, I can't remember the exact name
mm-hmm.
of the feature.
But what is the feature doing?
Sir, what it does is it takes an entire row and it turns it into one row, and it would usually keep the name of the first cell in the row. And you can use this to do text alignment and make headings for a table and so forth.
Based on what you just said there, you can actually come up with a name because exactly what it does is the name. If you look at it carefully, or if anybody knows the answer.
Sir, isn't it forging cells?
Origin, your
Sir, merge and center feature.
merge and center. That is it. So if you look at the image, you're gonna know. Remember, your spreadsheet is made up of rows and columns. This here is a column. This here is a column. This here is a column. That's a column. Every letter you see is a column. You're supposed to already put that in your mind. And every number you see there, that is a row. So you're supposed to already see that and then notice that this information that you see in here, schedule for summer, it is not inside of a single cell. It is resting upon multiple cells. If it was inside of a cell, you would at least see it at the starting of B or at the starting of C or the starting of D, but it's not starting in any one of those cells. So it's basically resting on all of these cells here, B, C, and D. And if you actually look at the lines, if you were to look at it closely and look at the lines, you can notice that there's actually no line here coming down. There's nothing coming down here. So what basically happened was that all of these cells here, these individual cells, they were merged as one. So that would be the merge and center feature that was used here. So that's what the question was asking. For you to look at row 1, it says to identify the name of the feature used in row 1. So row 1, that is this here, and what feature is used inside of it. That would be the merge and center feature. Everybody clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sierra, thank you, Ansano.
Yes, sir.
All right. Before we go ahead, any of the other questions before, was it confusing to you? From 4A going back, any of those questions were confusing to you guys? That you need clarification on? All right, I guess you guys were following all those questions. All right, so let's move ahead now. So B, 4B, identify the active cell. So that should be simple. Akilish.
Sir, is C5.
C5, that is correct. So column C, row 5, that's going to be C5. And the darker borders there is indicating the active cell. Great. Um, for C, state the letter for a column that contains a value. Arifa, not the question. Arifa, did we lose Arifa also? Ashley,
Yes, sir. Sir, it's C, right? Just needed to confirm.
C. So
Yes. No, what I meant, the question is
yeah,
for C.
yes, we're looking at,
Yeah.
yes, we're looking
Okay.
at.
My answer, sir, is D, E, and F.
Great, because you had me wondering there. So that is correct. So it was asking which state the letter for a column that contains a value. So columns D, columns E, and columns F all has values. Great. So why isn't this column here considered as having values? Anyone?
Sorry, please repeat.
Why is
Sir,
column
is it
C? Yeah, go ahead. Let me state the question and then you can go ahead. Why is column C not considered as a column that has values? Go ahead.
sir because it cannot be calculated?
Okay, good. That's one reason. There's also another reason
Because it has text.
because it has text. That is the main reason also. So yes, it cannot be calculated, but also because it has text inside of it. So I'm not talking about time at the top here. I'm talking about it has numbers 7, 5, 10, and so on, but it has text at the end of it. So even if we put it as a value, even if we set the format, because remember we can set data formats, even if we set it as that, remember, it's still a text. We can't do any calculations with that. I don't know if you can even accept it. Let me see. That's something interesting to try. 10 a.m. and we format it as number. And if we try to do calculations with it, so you see what happens. So equal. Anybody want to make a guess? Any bets? What's gonna happen? Are we gonna get 30 or are we gonna get error?
Sir,
Sir, I
most
think
likely
error.
error.
Error?
I think error. I think
Error?
error. Sir, because if you notice, right, when you type in 10 a.m., they identified it as a label instead of a value.
Good.
So they're most likely not going to add it when you try to add it. You're most likely going to come up with error.
All right. Let's see what's gonna happen. Error. So we cannot do a calculation with it. Congratulations to those that said error and those who were thinking of error, even though you did not see anything. So yes, even though we converted it to a number, it has numbers inside. The mere fact it has letters, it has text, no calculation can be done. Great. So D, state a row number that does not contain a value. Christina.
02.
We're not hearing you clearly.
02 does not contain any
Good.
values.
And any other rows?
01.
Row one, good.
Row
And
1.
right. And anything from row eight going down and beyond. No values inside of it. Great. Our next question, E. State the justification used in A5. So that's going to be A5. What is the justification? Lee?
Sir, left line or a line left. I'm not really sure which one you guys call it. I think left line.
It's both of them actually you can use. But if you actually look at it, it's actually going to say align left when you have your cursor over it. But you can say either one, nothing's wrong. But the actual name is align left and align right. And then we have center there. But you can say either one. So that's correct. And what is the justification for D6? So that's going to be D6. Keslin? Keslin? And seems we lost Keslin also. Kevandi?
Which we are Lisa, right?
We're at we're at D6. What is the alignment used here? Cell D6.
Sir, you called me before.
Yes. While you were in the washroom, I was calling for you.
Sir, you cut out for a moment. Sir, what number? Sir, where are we?
We're at D6, cell D6. What alignment is it?
Sir, a line right.
Align right. That's correct. Um, and in addition to what Lee mentioned, if you notice, the question also asks, what is the justification? That is also another term that you guys should take note of. So they can ask you what is the justification, or they can ask you what is the alignment. So justification, alignment, they can be used interchangeably to refer to whether the information is right align or align right, left align, or align left, whichever one you basically want to see. Am I breaking up for anybody else?
No, sir.
Alright. If you guys not hearing me properly at any time, just let me know. Alright, so moving on to F. Write the range of cells that contain the times for the dance lessons. So basically, what is the range that contains the time for dance lessons? Evandi? Evandi? Fraser?
C C3, C4, C5, C6.
Okay, those are the cells. That is correct, those are the cells, but the question is asking what is the range? Remember, there's a specific pattern that we say um, to mention or to what's the name of a range. So what would be it in this case here? How do we get the name of a range? I'm not talking about renaming, but based on the cells, how do we get the name of the range? Alright, Vandy left. Lillian,
So range 2.
range 2. What do you mean by range 2?
Isn't the ranges like the numbers at the side and the columns at the top there?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, Vandy, you want to try again? Or you want to give it to somebody else?
Sir?
I think everybody has internet issues. Alright, so let's go on to Maya. Maya, what is the name of the range?
Sir, I'm not sure.
Not sure. Alright. Alicia,
Yes, sir.
what is the name of the range that has the time for the dances? Or what is the range? Forget I said name. What is the range? I think that is what's confusing some of you. Anybody knows the answer? I see Kavandi is
It's
trying.
um
Go ahead, Kavandi.
C3 to C6.
Correct. That is it. So that is the range. So when we say toe, what does toe refer to?
Sir, colon.
The colon. Very good. So the question asks, if we go back to the question, write the range of cells that contains the time for dance lessons. So maybe me say a name was confusing you guys, but it's still the name for that range. So the range would be cell C3, which would be the first cell, and the last cell, cell C6. So that's going to be C3 colon C6. So cell C3 to cell C6. Lilian, you following? Or still confused?
Yes, sir. I'll start now.
Alright. So remember, anytime we are asking for a cell, the name of the cell, it's usually the default name. The default name. Unless you can see the name box or something like that, then we're talking about um, whatever we rename it as. But in this case, we don't see anything like that. So is the default name we're talking about. So if we're ever talking about what is the cell or what is the range of cells, what is the name of the cell, what is the name of the range, this is basically what we're talking about. What is the cell? Cell C3, or what is the range? C3 to C6. Alright, so we're on to G now. Write the name of the appropriate function for cell E7. E7. What is the name of that function used there? Alicia, you want to try again?
No, sir.
Why not? This is. Give it a try. What function? What does it look like? Alicia got shy. Pamela?
Sir, sum.
Sum. Let's see. So 20, 30, there's 50, and 35 and 50. There's another 50, and we have 100. Great. That is correct. So remember, we're looking at function. So function and formula. This here is adding up. Remember, the information, the data is coming downwards. The data is coming down. It's a table. The information is coming down. And if you notice here, we have the word total. And this is going across here. So the function here is adding up what is above. So that's going to be the sum function. H, state the name of the function that should be used to calculate the lowest limit. Alright, Malaysia is supposed to know this one. Redeem yourself.
Sir, can you repeat the question, please?
Question H. State the name of the function that should be used to calculate I, the lowest limit. I think you're overthinking these questions.
Sir, min.
Min, that is correct. All the question is asking is what is the name of the function. Remember, you can think of it this like a CSEC question. They add additional information just to throw you off. All this thing is asking is what is the name of the function, and the name of the function that gives you the lowest limit or anything that deals with the lowest value, that's going to be min, except that W party. All right, so what's going to give us the highest cost now? Shaniqua?
Sir Max?
Max. That is correct. So min and max. Good. I explain why cell F6 and F7 are displayed as shown in the figure and describe how it can be corrected. So that is these two cells here. Why are they like that? Do they like to be like that? Is it their way of life? Sierra?
The reason it's showing hashtags is because all the cell contents can't fit in the column because it's binary.
Could you go there back one time? I didn't hear the last part.
The reason why it's showing hashtags is because all the cell contents can't fit in the column.
Good. It cannot fit in the column. Alright, we can go with that. So we can work with that. So how do we fix it now?
You will have to widen the column.
Great. We have to widen the column. So it cannot fit within the width of the column. So we have to widen the column so that we get it wider and it can fit the data. So what kind of data is it though that shows up like this? Anyone? What kind of data shows up like hashtags?
Sir, values?
Value.
Values, that is correct. So only values, please remember that, please take note of that, those who are making their notes. Only values would give you hashtags. If it was labels, would it give you hashtags?
No, sir.
No. What would happen if it was labels?
Sir, if there's an empty column, it'll go over.
Good.
And if not, the text will just cut off.
Exactly, very good. So two things can happen if it was text. So if I brought in this column here, two things can happen. If this was empty, if this here was empty, then classical would overlap into the other cell, as Christina mentioned. But since it has data, and if I brought it in, it's gonna cut off basically up to where I lessen the width of that column. Great. So that is why that data is not showing. So our last question, which is going to be a bit tricky. State whether each of the following instructions can be achieved. Can we freeze row 1? So that's this row here. Suraj?
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Uh, yes, sir.
Yes, that is correct. We can freeze row 1. Um, what is the name of the option that will let you freeze row 1? Anybody remembers?
They're freeze panes.
Freeze panes, close. So that's gonna be freeze something row. Freeze top row. So freeze top row is gonna freeze the first row for you. But so can we freeze column A? That is this column here. Can we freeze that column? Anaya?
Sir, yes.
Yes, that is correct. What is the name of that option? Or anybody that knows? Or anybody that just saw it?
Sir, is it freeze stop column?
Stop column.
Yeah.
Freeze first column. So remember, the column is first. So but row is at the top. So freeze top row, freeze first column. So those are the options there. So yes, both of them can be frozen. Not a movie. So three, freeze row one and A. Can we do that? Can we freeze both of them at the same time? Akila?
Yes, sir.
Yes, that is correct. We can freeze both of them at the same time. What is the name of that feature? Anyone?
Sir, freeze panes.
Freeze pane. That is the freeze pane option. So freeze pane, that is the one you use to freeze basically at any location. So can we freeze row 2? Can we freeze this row? Akhilesh?
No, sir.
We have a no. Arifa?
Sir, no.
No. Ashley?
Yes, I think.
Think. What are you thinking?
I'm not sure. I think it can be frozen.
Christina?
Sir, it can't be frozen.
Can't?
Yes, sir, it can't.
So all the power that Elsa has, she can't freeze this thing? Anybody else that says yes? Anybody else?
Sir, we're talking about A1 and A2, right?
No, we're talking about just row 2. Can we freeze just row 2?
Sir, I feel like it's possible.
Anybody else? Getting a feeling it's possible? Thinking it's possible? Alright, those that are thinking it is possible, they are correct. You can freeze just row 2. So remember, when you're freezing, you basically put the active cell wherever you want to freeze. So if you want to freeze row 2, you can basically put it anywhere on the row 2, anyone in the cell on the row 2, and use the freeze pane option. Notice the line appeared, and I can scroll, and notice I have row 2 frozen here. So yes, it is possible to freeze row 2. Now what about row 2 and column B? Is that possible? Lee?
Sir, I don't know.
Okay, Keslin?
I
do not know, sir.
She would not knit. Okay, Bandy? Anybody? All right.
Sir, I am just making a.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it can be frozen together.
Anybody else? Sorry for trying, but if you're trying to be here and then
Sir, same. Because same.
we get two. I guess we
Sir, I think it can be frozen in a range.
frozen in a range. Okay. Suraj going more advanced with us. Frozen in a range. All right. So when it comes to freeze cells, what's the name of the feature? Freeze spin, and there was another name. What was the other name? Um, Title lock-in. So please remember that other name also. So title lock-in, freeze spin, same thing. Now, one thing to remember about freeze spin, you can freeze any row or column. It doesn't matter. Any row or column you can freeze. It doesn't matter where it is, if it's big, if it's small, wherever it's located, if it's at the end of the spreadsheet, at the beginning, it doesn't matter. Any part of the spreadsheet, you can freeze any row or any column. The options, you have two options here, freeze top row and freeze first column. Those are just for like if you're creating a simple table. But the freeze pane, that is for any row or column. So it's basically wherever you put your active cell, doesn't matter where you put it. I can put it till at the bottom here. And if I use freeze pane, notice the lines appeared. So I just froze rows 1 to 17. And if I scroll out, columns A to J was also frozen. I just froze this entire area here. This is not going to move no matter how many times I scroll. I was going to see if I turn it yellow. I'm going to turn it yellow. Notice it's going to, no matter how many times I scroll, you're still going to see yellow. So freeze pane, you can freeze any row or column. So please take note of that. So the answer to all of these questions was actually yes. Any one of them you could have frozen.
Was a trick question.
What was that, Arifa?
They tried to trick us.
Yes.
Sorry, they can't put all the answers at the same thing and then expect you not to think it wrong.
But that's why I actually said at the beginning it's gonna be a tricky question. Alright, so that brings us to the conclusion of our homework. Any questions on any one of the questions before we move on?
Wait, sorry, just to clarify, the last answer is yes, right?
All of it is yes.
Okay.
You can freeze any row or column. Doesn't matter what row it is, doesn't matter what column it is. You can freeze any one of it. Any other questions? Take a look back at all the questions, see if you have any questions. If you got the answer and it didn't match up with yours, it didn't make sense, my explanation didn't make sense, questions going once, questions going twice, sold to no questions, great. So that brings us to the end of chapter 7.2, not the end of class, 7.2. So in revision of what we looked at 7.2, we looked at what is the difference between worksheet, workbook, spreadsheet, chart sheets, all of those various terms. So it's important for you to be able to differentiate between all of those terms. What is a cell? What is an active cell? You gotta know the difference between all of them. What is cell reference? What are the different types of data? Why do we need different types of data? What is a label? Why do we need labels? What is a value? Those things you need to remember. Um, Certain data have default formatting. So how do you change format? What are the different alignments or justification? Notice it's also here. Um, Text alignment or justification. So you might bring either one of those words. Um, what else? Remember merge and center? Merges or groups as a range of cells together. So can a range of cell be two cell?
Yeah.
I like that half, yes. Lilian, what do you say?
I say yes.
Yes. The answer is yes. Two cells can be considered a range. Because remember, a cell is one cell. A cell is not two cell. So anytime you go beyond one cell, you are entering a range. You only work with one cell at a time. If it's more than one cell, you are working with a range. We looked at cut, copy, and paste. Remember the clipboard is temporary. How many entries does it have?
24.
24.
Great. I'm not sure. I've never seen. I've worked quite a few past papers, and I've never seen default width and row height come up in one of those papers. So I don't think it's that important to remember, but you gotta know if you can remember fine details like that. Um, let's see. We learned why we see hashtags, how labels would roll over. Like for example, here, it got cut off. The label got cut off there. Um, Auto fit. Please remember what is auto fit. Anybody remembers what is auto fit? How would you describe auto fit? How it functions?
Sir, autofit is a feature in spreadsheet that causes the cell to be as large. Sorry, it's okay. Sorry, it's what am I
Something was something being large.
saying? Okay, so what autofit would do is that it would custom. I That's not what I'm looking for, but that's not what I'm looking for. Workers now. The size of the
Resize.
cell that yes, it resizes the cell so that it's wide enough that it would be as large as the largest cell entry in the column. Oh god.
And
Sir, it basically, sir,
yeah, go ahead.
sir, it basically customizes the cell to the amount of information entered.
Good. But I don't like the word customize. Use the word resize. Customize does more of designing and formatting and those kind of phrases. So use resize. You're changing the size of the cell. And remember, it's not only width; it's also height. So when you're resizing a cell, that's why we say cell, and not resizing a column or resizing a row. You can say resizing a column or resizing a row. You can't say that. But when we're talking about the cell, it can either be the height of that cell or the width of the cell you are resizing. And it resizes to um, if also you see the largest data. Because remember, if you compare, like for example, the number 8 and the number 100, then 100 is the more larger data. And for example, if you have words, it's just a technicality in how you phrase certain things. So you can say it resizes to the widest data, or it resizes to the tallest data. Because remember, it's more of physical size rather than rather than figurative size. So if you whatever text you have inside there, it's more of physical size that would be taking up the space, not whether it's a large data or not. Yeah, I hope that made sense. All right, so we also learned what is a formula. A formula is where we basically make an equation. You are making an equation, you are making some form of calculations, you're going to use operators, whereas a function is a built-in formula, a built-in equation. We're actually going to be looking at, yes, in this chapter here, we're going to be looking at a lot more functions there. Um, we looked at autofill. What is autofill? What is it basically used for? All I heard was a bunch of noise from Marifa. What is autofill used for?
So for copying cells.
Copying cells. Good, I like that. Copying cells. And because remember, cells gonna refer to the data inside of it. Great. So whatever is inside of the cell would get copied. So what cells? Faraway cells. What is the term? What cells will get copied?
They're adjacent.
Adjacent cells. Correct. Or basically cells that are right next to each other. So autofill is used to copy data, copy a cell, whatever's inside the cell. If it has text, if it has numbers, whatever the case may be, it gets copied to adjacent cells. And if the data can change or increment, it would do so. So remember this small square here, that is the autofill button or the autofiller. Alright, don't use that term, autofiller. I just made it up. Alright, and then we looked at naming a cell range, naming a cell, and then we ended off with title locking. Great. Um, you guys clear on this entire chapter? Before we move on? You guys good on this chapter?
Yes, sir.
Give me a second. Hello? You want to come here about Alright. Great. Good. So we can move on to chapter 7.3 now. Now in this chapter, we're going to be looking at a lot more functions. Basically, all of the functions that CSEC wants you to know about and how to implement in spreadsheet. Now these are not all of the functions in total. These are just the basic ones that CSEC requires you to learn. So if you want to do more research and look at the any other additional function that is simple for you to use, that you can incorporate into spreadsheet, that's just more beneficial to you. But this is just basically the um, what they require. And then we can also look at relative and absolute addressing. This actually relates to the autofill. where anybody remember when we were copying formulas? The formula was changing when we copy it. Anybody remember that?
Yes, sir.
Right. So that has to do with relative and absolute addresses. So when we reach this part here, we are going to look at why formulas change when we are copying it. So we're actually going to start some exercises. These are some exercises for you guys to start working, to start practicing on your spreadsheet. Remember, you have to practice first. Remember, you're not going to be getting your SBA for this term. So you have to basically try to memorize and practice and learn everything basically for when you're going to get your SBA. And if that time period or that time span is going to be a relatively good while, you might forget a few things. So my recommendation to all my students is always to, if you forget something, go over back the exercises. The exercises actually helps you to remember a lot of things in about spreadsheet. Alright, to get us started with the chapter, we are going to be looking at developing a simple spreadsheet. Nothing too complicated, a simple spreadsheet. So let's have Arita, Anaya. You can, let me see, up to, alright, so you're gonna read up to the next paragraph, so up to we. Go ahead.
Sir,
Yes, we can read.
can you please repeat from where to where?
Up to the bottom.
Yes, sir, I'm hearing you. I don't know if it's just me, but my screen sticks more to the lower part and seeing arithmetic formula and functions.
I guess it could be.
Okay, I see it. I see it now. As with other computer applications, the best results come from thinking about the task in hand. When planning a worksheet, ask yourself the following four questions. What is the goal of the worksheet? What are the desired results, outputs? What data is needed to calculate the result, input? What calculations are needed to produce the desired result? Sometimes a spreadsheet is created to solve a problem for just one user and it's never used again. It is set up quickly to get some result, but the appearance is there you go, Play-Doh.
I think your internet is a bit slow, so you're gonna update soon, hopefully.
Sir, it's the same thing for me.
Oh, thank God I'm not here.
Same here too.
Um, are you guys sure you're not zoomed into your screen? So you're not seeing
Sir, no, it's not.
so you're not
I'm seeing
seeing.
it now, like it
Oh, your
just
internet.
Alright, go ahead.
it is set up quickly to get some results, but the appearance is not important. No one other than the creator of the worksheet will see it since it will only be used once. The creator of such spreadsheet would still consider the four questions above, just not in a structured way.
Good. So you guys not seeing my taskbar at the bottom here? Those that seen the screen.
I'm seeing it.
Sir, I seen everything.
Sir, we can see it, yes.
So still confused. Anyway, moving on. Alright. Hopefully it doesn't affect your learning. Um so what are we looking at? What we're looking at is basically how do we plan for a spreadsheet? Well, based on the second paragraph, sometimes we might just create a spreadsheet for one purpose and we never use it again. So the appearance is not that important. However we design it, however we put in the formula, however we put in the data, it doesn't matter because it's only a one-time use. But if you're going to be hired, if somebody is going to request that you design a spreadsheet for them to store their data, and later on they might want to present the data to maybe their employers to show how they're selling on their products, how they're making returns, and how taxes are being paid, and all of those kind of things, then you're going to want to think of how am I going to present this data? How am I going to design the spreadsheet to make everything look neat and professional? So that is where these questions comes into play. You have to ask yourself, what is the goal of the spreadsheet, or what is the purpose of the spreadsheet? What am I creating it for? Am I doing it for a professional environment? Is it for my employer that later on they're going to want us to share this information with maybe board members, with other persons outside of the company, other partners, and so on? Then the spreadsheet's going to look professional. But if it's for your parents got a small business and they want you to do a nice spreadsheet for them, then design doesn't really matter that much, or so on. So, what's the purpose of the spreadsheet? Um, what is the result? Question number two. Or basically, what is output? How you want it to look. So, what do you want from the spreadsheet? What calculations do you want? Um, and then we're going to look at the input. What data do you need to do those calculations? So sales prices, VAT percentage, how much of the item was bought, what is the data that's going to be put in, and how do you need to calculate those questions. Number four, how do you need to calculate those figures, those values, so that you can get the results that you want. So that's just one example of maybe a small business. You think about all of those things so that you can create a spreadsheet for that situation. So, how you create a spreadsheet is going to depend upon the first part. What is the goal of the spreadsheet? So, for example, when it comes to your SBA that might be coming up, you should be thinking that this is an important document. This is going to determine the my grade for IT. So I should put my best to ensure everything is neat, everything is professionally looking, all my columns are straight, my rows are in line with each other. That should be your line of thinking. So those questions you would ask yourself. Now, so you're gonna want to consider those questions there.
Excuse me, sir. So we gotta draw a spreadsheet.
No, I'm talking about design. When I say design, I'm talking about like change font, add borders, add colors. That's designing.
Oh, okay.
You're not doing anything physical. You're doing everything through the software. So anything I see, I'm referring to software. Good question though. Alright, so continuing, next to paragraph, let's have Akila. Not hearing you, Akila.
Sorry, sir. Another form of worksheet is one that will be used many times, but only its creator will be using it. So the author will take a little more time with the above questions and the layout and appearance of the spreadsheet will probably be better. The final category of spreadsheet is one set up for someone else. More time must be taken to answer the above questions, and the spreadsheet will need good design and good documentation. Since other people have access to the spreadsheet, the creator of the worksheet may have to meet with these users many times so that they can make suggestions and improve it until it is finalized.
Great. So we're looking at different use cases of creating spreadsheet. So the most simplest case is going to be you creating a spreadsheet for yourself. You want, maybe say for instance you want to create a simple chart. So you open a spreadsheet, you type in your data, and you create a chart. You're done with the spreadsheet. You're never going to see the spreadsheet for the rest of your life because it was only for creating this chart. But if somebody's going to request of you, your parents or your family, uncle, you're gonna say that I hear you're doing spreadsheet in school now, so you can help me out to make the spreadsheet. So you're gonna want to consider how you're gonna be designing and so on. And then an even more advanced case is if somebody hire you and they say they're gonna pay you for it. So they hear you're good at creating spreadsheet. So they want to hire you so that you can design one so that it can be used for their business, for their organization, to store data, do calculations, and so on. So in those cases, in this situation, when you create a spreadsheet, you're going to want to think of making the spreadsheet simple. Because remember, we as humans, we tend to think that how we are thinking, other persons are going to understand, but that is not the case. Persons, not every person understands how we are thinking. So, whenever you are designing something, this is not only for spreadsheet, you need to think of will the other, if somebody was to look at this program, will they be able to understand it? Will they be able to look at it and see exactly what I am seeing? Think exactly what I'm thinking. So, if you're going to create a program for somebody else, you're going to need to create it in such a way that whenever they're going to use it, they shouldn't have any issues to know that I should put this piece of data here, I should put that type of data over there, and there shouldn't be any confusion about what to do with the spreadsheet and how it works and so on. So in those cases, it's going to have a good overall design, a simple, clean, good overall design that is easy to follow, and it's also going to have good documentation. So telling persons how to use it, because looking at it alone, even though it might be simple, a person might not know how to make use of it. So let me see if I find an example for you, because I was actually thinking about an example of this here, and I think um, this file here that I have, loan file, no, that one's too simple. Startup expenses. Okay. Good. So this one, it's not that complicated, but let me see if I find it. Okay, so this one here. This one is actually I teach Cape Digital Media sixth form, and somebody created these spreadsheets whereby we can just put in the data that we need. We don't need to design the spreadsheet, somebody already designed it for us. And we just have to put in the data and we can get our calculations. And some of my students, they actually have a difficulty putting in the data and even fixing back the data because they're not familiar with spreadsheet. So this is where good overall design and good documentation would come into play because this case here is somebody else using the document. So for example, at the top here, if you notice, they type the word company name. So that means that you would have to put in your company name. This spreadsheet here is for planned expenses, and they give some default items, employee costs, how much wages you have to give them in January, February, you basically change the value to how much ever you want, and notice it automatically recalculates for you. So this was built for that purpose. We could have add more items. So if I wanted to add another item, insert, but I think if you put in another, okay, it automatically recalculates there. Correct. So if you don't know how to use it, or if a person doesn't know how to use spreadsheet, they can have a hard time if you design a spreadsheet for them, if they're not familiar with the use of spreadsheet. So why I'm showing you this is because you have to think about that. Basically, with any software, think of how can I design the software in such a way that it is going to be simple to persons, and it can also have good documentation that maybe they can read, some form of instructions, so that they know how to go about using the spreadsheet. But this here is a good example of how we use spreadsheets. For quick and easy calculations, we have a default pattern here, and we can simply type in whatever we want, and we get automatic recalculation of our data. If my students, say for instance, they have to pay for GTT Blaze, they can type that in, GTT Blaze. They pay in $5,000 a month, and that will get automatically added and recalculated there. So this is an example of creating a spreadsheet for someone else to use. Are you guys following on what I've been saying so far?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So let's go on to arithmetic formulae. Akhilesh, can you read for us?
Arithmetic formulae. If you have many operators in a formula, it is important to follow the rules for order of operators. You have probably come across the mnemonic BODMAS in maths. The first letter of each word stands for the operator. Brackets, parentheses, take precedence over any other operator. The computer must calculate the part of the formula in brackets first. Order. Order means anything raised to the power of a number such as 2 squared. Division and multiplication are calculated next in the order left to right as they appear on the formula. Addition and subtraction are the last two operations to be carried out. Again, these are calculated in order as they appear from left to right in the formula.
Good. And Arifa, finish out the reading.
In a spreadsheet, formula are used to calculate answers based on mathematical equations that you create. When creating formula, you may use actual values, cell addresses, a combination of the two. To enter a formula, click the cell where you want to insert the formula, press the equal sign, enter the formula, press enter.
Great. So I'm sure all of you know what BODMAS is, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Anybody
sir.
anybody
Yes,
here
sir.
doesn't know what BODMAS is? So that we send you back to primary school. So
So I will gladly go back. Less stress.
we,
Um,
I can put any requests here, don't worry. So what
Appreciate it, sir.
what I want you guys to take note of is that when it comes to IT, quite a few of the things that you're going to learn in other subjects, you're actually going to implement it into IT. Or basically, you can switch it the other way around. IT is going to allow you to make use of those knowledge and skills that you would have learned in other subjects. So, for example, in maths, you would have learned how numbers are calculated. What are the rules that you have to follow when you're doing calculations? And when you're creating formulas, that same rule still has to be applied. So when you understand how those rules function, how they operate, how they're guided, then when you're creating your formula, you won't have a difficulty to create a formula because it has to follow that rule of BODMAS. So if you want a certain calculation to be carried out, so let me see if I can get an example. Equal 4 times 3 divided by 5 minus 3. So you got negative 6 there. I'm gonna copy that. So you got negative 6 there. But what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna change up the operators. Um, so that was let me see, that was a asterisk there. I'm gonna put that back there. Put the minus in front here. So we have a whole different value there now. All because the operators change. So the same rule of BODMAS, brackets first, then the order, then the division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. That same rule applies to your formula when you are creating them. And whenever you're creating a formula, this was mentioned already, you can use values in your calculation. Values are going to be numbers. You can use cell addresses, as you can see here, or you can use a combination of the both. Any one of them you can use to do your calculation. Now, remember, each would be, you have to determine which would be best suited for the formula. There are some cases where you have to use a value. Say for instance, you're gonna constantly be using a standard value. Say for instance, maybe a 14%. You're gonna constantly be using that. So you put that in the value in the formula. But we all know what the more effective method would be to use these. That's just an example. There's some cases where you might want to use a value, some cases where it's going to be more effective to use a cell. So you always have to be thinking, what is the more effective use case? Should I use a value or should I use a cell address? And then when you're creating a formula, always ensure we start with an equal sign and we enter the formula, we press enter to complete. We already actually looked at that already, but important to remember, formulas always start with an equal sign. Alright, so we're actually going to wrap up here today. In addition to when I was talking about BODMAS, other subject areas being used in IT, even later on in the third term, last term and fourth term, when we're going to do word processing. In English, you guys would have been taught what is the layout of a letter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. So that same layout now in word processing, you're actually going to have to implement that layout to design your letter in Microsoft Word. So all of the rules that you would have learned to create a letter, you have to use that for your letter. So because remember, everything you're doing, you have to think as though you are creating a professional document. You're creating a professional software that somebody's going to use. So it always has to be the best so that you're basically preparing your skill set now for the future. Alright, so well, we basically already reviewed 7.2. So what we actually looked at today, we looked at how do we plan for a spreadsheet. How do we plan for a spreadsheet? If you're going to create a spreadsheet for yourself, you basically don't need any planning. Type in your data, do what you got to do. You're done with the spreadsheet, you delete it, that's it, story done. But if you're going to create it for somebody, for your family, for your employer, you need to ask yourself these questions. Why do they want a spreadsheet? What is the purpose of it? What do they want out of the spreadsheet? What is the goal? And second, what is the output? What results do they want to see? What calculations basically do they want to see? Then what kind of data do I need to get these calculations? And how am I going to calculate those data so that I get the results now? What formulas should I use? What function should I use? And so on. So that's how you plan to have your spreadsheet. And then lastly, we looked at when it comes to your formula, please remember your formula follows the rule of BODMAS. So you have to be careful with when you're creating formulas. In not all cases, you're going to use functions where you don't have to worry about how you're putting in operators. You don't have to worry about BODMAS because there's not a function for every form of calculation. There might be some form of calculation where you're going to need to create a formula for it. So in those cases, you're going to need to ensure it's following that rule of BODMAS. Alright, so that's basically all we're going to look at for tonight. Any questions before we close off? Any questions, suggestions, recommendations, comments, salutations? Alright. That's Akila. I guess that was a no from Akila. Alright, so we're gonna wrap up here for tonight. If you guys don't have any questions or anything to say, we're going to end here. Enjoy the rest of your night. See you guys.